orders that it be referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Moore, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to be joined by my colleagues this evening to talk about our progress on the reconciliation bill, as well as the importance of supporting our Main Street businesses during Small Business Week. I understand some of my colleagues have commitments, and I want to be respectful of their time, so I'll have them start us off before I provide some of my own comments. And with that, I'd like to yield to the gentlewoman and much improved representative from the previous individual of the great state of North Dakota, Ms. Fedorchak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Representative Moore. Thank you. I never get tired of that joke. Mr. Speaker, as we consider the critical reforms in the reconciliation process, I rise today to make the case for why we must eliminate the generous federal subsidies for wind and solar energy paid for by taxpayers. By continuing to incentivize these intermittent energy sources, with generous tax credits, we are distorting energy markets, sending the absolute wrong signal to investors, and spending hundreds of billions of dollars in taxpayer money. We must stop providing generous incentives that run contrary to the types of energy resources we need. And tonight, I want to highlight 10 reasons why. Yes, you heard me right. There are 10 good reasons to eliminate these incentives. First, the cost to taxpayers is enormous. Over the next decade, these subsidies are projected to cost up to $900 billion. Second, these subsidies are driving instability in our power grid. Right now, 2/3 of the country is at risk of not having enough power to meet demand. That's not a few years from now. That's not a near long-term problem. That is today. Keep in mind, the power needed for AI is also growing exponentially, further creating a more difficult problem for us. Third, grid operators are asking for dispatchable resources, such as coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Yet, we continue to incentivize the opposite. These reliable resources are being prematurely retired, and we're not replacing them with the technologies we can count on around the clock. This is not a political statement. It's simply a matter of physics. We don't need to imagine the consequences of retiring these baseload energy resources. Spain, just a few weeks ago, experienced nationwide blackouts, and their economy came to a grinding halt. Spain relied on wind and solar for 80% of its power, which is ultimately what jeopardized their grid. This should be a wake-up call for policymakers everywhere. That brings me to reason number 4. Despite the warning signs and the cries from grid operators, 95% of the projects waiting to connect to our grid in the U.S. are wind and solar. 95%. That's not because of market demand for wind and solar. It's because of the very generous subsidies that this body and the rest of Washington continues to provide for these resources. This artificial growth is making it harder for reliable baseload generation to connect to the grid. Number 5, these same incentives are distorting the market. Eliminating these subsidies would allow private investment to go toward other technologies that are more in line with what our grid actually needs. As I mentioned earlier, with the rise of AI, we're going to need a lot more power. We should be sending the right market signals to bring the power on that will actually meet the demand that we need for the future. Number 6, wind and solar are no longer emerging technologies. They are mature. They are widely developed. Wind and solar now account for 17% of our electric generation. The cost of these technologies has also dropped dramatically, and this is the 7th reason to phase them out. Wind and solar technologies have less overhead, longer lifespans, and higher profits than they did when these credits were introduced nearly 30 years ago in the 1990s. For example, the cost of solar has decreased more than 80% since 2010. Truly, the market is more than capable of supporting continued growth without subsidies. And as if that isn't compelling enough, there are yet more reasons to phase out these subsidies. Number 8, their efficiency has increased substantially. Today's wind turbines and solar panels are far more productive than they were even a decade ago. When I first started permitting these projects 12 years ago, the capacity factor for wind was around 25%. Today, that average capacity factor is up to 40%, and in some places, even 50%. Clearly, these are proven technologies. Number 9, the true cost of installing wind and solar is often misrepresented. Advocates routinely leave out the cost of the massive transmission infrastructure needed to connect remote wind and solar projects to population centers. They also ignore the cost of backup generation needed to keep the lights on at night or when the wind isn't blowing. The low-cost claims don't account for these expenses, but rest assured, utility customers still pay for them. And last but not least, eliminating these subsidies is fully consistent with an all-of-the-above energy strategy. I believe in competition. Wind and solar are viable, market-proven, widely available technologies. Mr. Speaker, it is time to let them compete and succeed without the help of federal taxpayers. Phasing out these tax credits will save taxpayers billions of dollars, help restore reliability to our power grid, and help deliver on the promise of one big, beautiful bill to make America stronger, safer, and more competitive. Let's retire these subsidies permanently. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you to the gentlewoman from North Dakota. And I will now yield so much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Stutzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the opportunity to talk on such an important issue that faces our country. Our country's been ailing since 2020, but thankfully President Trump is back along with Republicans in both the House and the Senate, and we're ready to govern responsibly. The prescription that will help heal our country and get us back on track is the beautiful reconciliation bill that Republicans have been working on diligently to get to President Trump's desk. It cannot be overstated. Our debt crisis is out of control. When I was first sworn into office in 2010, our federal government had $9 trillion of debt. When I left temporarily in 2017, despite our efforts to curb spending, it had doubled to $18 trillion of debt. And now today in 2025, we're staring down the barrel of $36 trillion of debt. This is only going to hurt our children, grandchildren, and frankly, it's going to hurt us today. Republicans' big, beautiful bill was passed out of our Budget Committee just under 3 months ago and is already well on its way to being approved by this body by Memorial Day. The legislation that committees are marking up this week and next are going to usher in the new golden age of America by prioritizing revolutionary conservative agenda that will improve the efficiency of government and finally get a handle on runaway spending that has gone unchecked for far too long. This bill is going to lower taxes. This bill is also going to increase border security and restore fiscal sanity back to the greatest country on earth. Gone are the days of prioritizing wokeness, frivolous spending, and the leftist dream of open borders. And here to stay is a new era of putting America first. The American people spoke loud and clear in November. They are ready for Washington to operate in a new patriotic way and a responsible way. And our reconciliation package is the first step in that direction. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of such a historic opportunity, and we as Republicans cannot let this opportunity slip by. And I appreciate our Speaker and the leader in the Senate working together well, and this body working together to make sure that our country is strong, not only for our generation, but for generations to come, and continue to keep America great. Thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank you to the gentleman from Indiana. We appreciate his work. We share a lot of work together on the Budget Committee, and it's been a very active time. I will now yield so much time as she may consume to the gentlewoman from quite possibly maybe the second best state out there in the West, second to Utah, of course. I think we have that mantle pretty well locked up, but there's some other good ones in the running. Ms. Hagman.
I like being in the top 5. I rise to recognize Wyoming's outstanding small businesses during this Small Business Week. Like Wyoming's diverse topography, from pastures to sagebrush to majestic mountains, our small business landscape boasts a robust variety of services and industries. We have small businesses catering to the oil and gas industry, mining and energy, and we have boutique shops that make up our incredibly vibrant downtown areas. We have international businesses like Brunton within our state and those with similar national prominence, even some supporting our space mission, our military, and putting food on the tables of Americans across this great country. I recently had the opportunity to meet Wyoming Small Business Person of the Year, Lauren Hirschchap of Brunton International. Lauren is an innovator who saw an opportunity to improve a product she used every day. She worked with her husband to refine the tool and presented it to Brunton, a company which at the time was just a business whose equipment Lauren was using. Within only a few years from presenting that idea, the company deciding to move forward with then manufacturing and eventually marketing the new product, Lauren and her husband David purchased that company. And thanks to Lauren, Brunton International is now, once again, an American-owned company, and it is a beacon of resilience and prominence, in no small part due to the company's passionate leaders who are willing to take on new opportunities with enthusiasm and trudge through challenges with tenacity. Wyoming businessmen and women are a special kind of people. If you're in business in Wyoming, you're willing to be both the janitor and the CEO, sometimes even on the same day. You have a growth mindset and are willing to take on the challenges brought by fluctuating markets. You both strive to progress into new areas, but are willing to take time for one-off projects in order to help an individual in your hometown. For Wyoming's business community and small businesses across our great nation, I am committed to ensuring that we pass legislation that creates a legacy and regulatory climate that allows our small businesses to be competitive and to grow. Small businesses are pivotal to the success of our nation's economy. I join my colleagues this week in celebration of the small businesses that keep our country thriving, and I will work with them to ensure that there is opportunity long into the future. With that, I yield back.
Thank you to the gentlewoman from Wyoming. I appreciate her being a part of the special order this evening. And our last colleague that is going to address us this evening is a new member from the great state of Kansas, Representative Schmidt. Also an improvement to the previous member. He's a good friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll have no comment on that last comment, my colleague from Utah. Mr. Speaker, I am very proud to join my colleagues tonight in recognition of National Small Business Week, and actually all the parts we've talked about are connected. National Small Business Week recognizes the importance of the small businesses throughout all of our communities, and the numbers aren't that different state to state. In my home state of Kansas, 99% of the businesses that operate are small businesses. Whether they're small businesses on Main Street, small mom and pop shops, little manufacturing operations, farming operations, supporting operations, 99% of our businesses are small businesses. And those 99% in my state employ about 600,000 Kansans, which is roughly half the total number of Kansans who work. So all but 1% of our businesses, 99%, employ half of our people who rely on them for their livelihood, for their hopes, for their jobs, for their benefits in many cases. and for filling their days, because they obviously have to work in order to support their families and pursue their dreams. So we cannot overstate the importance of small businesses to all of us, the people we represent. And yet that often doesn't get itself reflected in the decisions and the actions that come out of this town. My colleagues have talked a bit about reconciliation, and I say these are connected because we are going to make large policy decisions here in the House and in the Senate and with the President over the course of the coming weeks that are going to have huge implications for all of those small businesses on our Main Street and all of those individuals who work in them and rely on them for their livelihoods. We talk a lot about the tax implications, and that's not my focus this evening. It's critically important. We have to extend the small business and middle-class tax relief so that those businesses can continue to operate and continue to employ the people we represent. But I want to talk a little bit tonight about the regulatory environment and the burden that we have created, really a tax by another means. When the government says to a small business, "Thou shalt do this," the compliance cost of doing this is borne by that business, and it comes out of their bottom line or out of their pockets. It takes away from their ability to invest in expanding and growing and hiring more people. It has the same effect of taking another dollar of tax out of their pocket to pay not for their priorities or their community's priorities or their employees' priorities, but for the government's priorities. And that is true whether it's a dollar taken out of their pockets, collected in tax, in cash, or whether it's a dollar taken out of their pockets and ordered by the government to be used to comply with a government requirement, a mandate, a regulation. I am one who believes, because my constituents have told me this, that one of the most important things we can do and must do in this Congress is make real progress on regulatory relief for the small businesses that all of our communities rely on. And we've begun to take some steps. You know, Mr. Speaker, that we are currently using one of several tools available to us in this body to undo some, a small number, but some, of the newer regulations that have piled burdens onto our small businesses. We're using the Congressional Review Act. We only have a short amount of time we can use that tool, so we got to strike while the iron's hot. We have so far in the House used that tool to propose undoing 15 new regulations that were adopted in roughly the last 6 months of the prior administration. Of those 15 that we have approved here, 3 have been signed into law by the President, so we've done 3. Another 6 have been approved by the Senate and are currently awaiting President Trump's signature. And then there are an additional 6 that are awaiting consideration and I hope and expect passage in the Senate. So that's good. It's a good thing we're using the tool available to try to make progress, to provide some relief for those small businesses. But Mr. Speaker, it's barely a drop in the bucket. It's barely a drop in the bucket. The chart next to me was compiled by George Washington University. It shows the number of pages in the Federal Register, starting back in 1950. The Federal Register, of course, is the government book, the government entity, where all of the agency regulations, not the laws passed by this body, but the agency regulations, the bureaucratic regulations, get published. And they have the force and effect of law. They are just as burdensome and binding on somebody running a mom-and-pop shop on Main Street in Kansas as is a statute enacted by this body. Usually, they are regulations adopted by an agency at the direction or with the permission or arguably with the permission of this body. We fight over that sometimes when agencies exceed the authority they were given. But there's a penchant here in Congress to avoid some of the hard decisions and just ship it downtown, let the agencies have a lot of running room, And as a result of that, you get lots of decisions, and sometimes they're not consistent. So one administration goes one way and another administration goes the next way, or they adopt one regulation and then they pile another regulation on top of it and then another on top of that. I heard a term the other day, I'd never heard it before. Coral reefing, this idea that you lay down something that's living and makes sense, and then that layer dies and you just build another on top and another on top, and eventually you get this giant dead mass. That's what we've done with a lot of these agency regulations. Part of it's Congress's fault. Part of it is the agency's fault. If you look at this chart, Mr. Speaker, back in 1950, roughly the time they started publishing the Federal Register, compiling all these agency rules, diktats, actions, there were about 10,000 pages. It's about how long it was, the sum of all regulations adopted by agencies. The year I was born in 1968, it had grown fivefold to 50,000 pages. And when this chart was compiled about a year ago, a little more, it was nearly 200,000 pages. Nearly 200,000 pages of regulations that folks in our country, our small businesses, have to comply with. And by the way, to put that in comparison, the number of pages in the U.S. Code, the laws actually adopted by the people's representatives in this body, last time it was compiled, it was around 60,000 pages. So about 4 times, roughly, 3-4 times as many rules and requirements on Main Street businesses written by people nobody out in the real world ever voted for, as opposed to laws that their elected representatives are accountable for. And by the way, this chart is not current. It doesn't include those regulations piled on top of this last tallest bar. Since this chart was compiled, we know that in the last 5 months of the Biden administration alone, more than 1,400 new regulations were adopted and shoved out the door. That's not 1,400 pages. That's 1,400 regulations, most of which were long. So this chart is actually much higher. So, Mr. Speaker, I just rise tonight to remind all of my colleagues and all of us who serve in these roles how important it is that during this Small Business Week, as we are doing our reconciliation bill and we're doing all the things we do, that we not forget about this hidden tax, that we have created this burden that we have placed on the 99% of businesses, small businesses in our community, who employ half the people working in my state, making it harder for them to do what they do, what we rely on them to do, what we count on them to do, and more importantly, what the people we represent, our constituents, count on them to do. We can't lose sight of it. We must fix this system, tear down some of the coral reef, and get those lines moving back down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield.
Thank you to the gentleman from Kansas. Excellent points. We all talk small business. We all use it as a line and bullet point, and we all say we support them, and then where does the actual policy come in? Those are incredibly important points to highlight, that they are the lifeblood. We've got data that suggests Utah, which has an incredible economy, strong work ethic, low unemployment, good volunteerism across the board, like just ranked high in the economic indicators for the country, and we are heavy tilted towards small business out of Utah. Not an enormous amount of global headquarters for big multinational firms. It's a ton of small businesses. So thank you for highlighting that. Thank you to my other colleagues for being here to discuss the ongoings for this week. We've heard so much about the reconciliation process and the dangers of not getting this done. There is a real threat. We're working under unique circumstances because there's a time limit set for the end of this year that if we don't accomplish this piece of legislation, there's no other way to look at it except for the fact that taxes will increase on virtually every American family and business. And we desperately want to create good, strong, predictable tax policy so our companies and our families can continue to thrive, can continue to understand what their landscape is for them to compete and go and create more job growth, actually go and create more revenue for our nation to become a wealthier nation. This is a priority for Republicans. It's a priority for House GOP leadership, President and his administration, and we are neck deep in the process of getting this over the finish line. This bill will deliver on our conservative agenda and make positive changes that we know Americans want. From a more secure border to stronger domestic energy resources to more efficient federal programs to a tax code that supports families and businesses. This is a once-in-a-generation moment, and I'm grateful to be a part of this effort on both the Ways and Means and Budget committees. There is, obviously, a lot going into this, and on the Ways and Means Committee, we're trying to find the sweet spot of many considerations at play. We need to ensure the provisions in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act aren't just extended, but where possible, made permanent. If we don't act, we risk seeing critical policies roll back, such as the child tax credit, which goes back to just $1,000. It was $1,000 prior to 2017. Republicans doubled it. That reverts back to $1,000. $1,000 in 2026, after the inflation that we've seen over the last 4 years in the previous administration, is a significantly different number than it would be from pre-2017. And while we can't solve the debt crisis with this bill alone, it will drive strong economic growth, bolster GDP. We know this because we've seen this, and it puts us in a better position to address our national deficits. This is probably the most substantive action I've been a part of, and it's been an honor to have been right in the thick of it. Over the last few weeks, several committees have passed bills aimed at saving billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're well on our way to making historic savings a reality. And as we work on this, as we work through this, we're doing so with a clear focus on the needs of our economy, particularly on small businesses. This week is Small Business Week, and recognizing the hard work of our small business owners is something that we can all support from both sides of the aisle. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. As I mentioned, what it means to the state of Utah, and they are critical to every local community across this country. In this role, I am grateful to get to know as many small business owners and hear their concerns, understand their areas of growth, what their opportunities are, and most importantly, what their challenges. Going back to the reconciliation package, and we're working on particularly the tax portion, we're looking to deliver positive results to our small businesses and craft policies that allow them to thrive. The 199 Cap A small business LLC, S-Corp deduction from their qualified business expense, a 20% deduction, expires at the end of this year. That is a massive tax hike on small businesses. And this is oftentimes a category that gets overlooked because you talk about corporations and you talk about high net worth individuals, but the small businesses are structured that their ordinary income is taxed at what some of the highest income individuals of our tax situation. And so these small businesses are taxed at a significantly high rate, oftentimes higher than other corporations. We need to make sure that 199 Cap A is extended, and if not, just extended, made permanent. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act made our small businesses more competitive. And we want to continue to pursue policies that provide regulatory relief, economic stability, and the ability to grow and create jobs. Again, I thank my colleagues for joining me tonight to talk about these important issues, and we will continue to dig into this in the weeks to come. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time to the chair.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025,